his list, I wrote my list, and we kept swapping lists and comparing, and there were so many people that we could have had on the project that, I mean, the thing would have been, 75,000, minutes long. And it was just a process of elimination, as we would compare and decide, okay, this person would be great, maybe we can use this person next time. It was basically people who had in some way changed drumming, people who had made a really big mark, as it were. And I think we came up with a really fine list at the end.
Why was Neil the ideal person to sort of seize control, take the reins on the project along with you?
Actually, Neil was the perfect person to take the reins on this project because his feeling for the music and his feeling for Buddy was beyond anything you could have hoped for. He also would probably have been the only person who could have gotten this thing done by a major record company. Because if I had come to a label and said, hey, I want a rock and roll budget for a jazz album, I would have been, laughed out of the building. And Neil could do that, and he did.
You'd known him for a while. I mean, were you aware for quite a while about his affinity for Buddy and his playing?
I met Neil in 1991, and at that point in time, I didn't know that he was even into jazz or that he even knew who Buddy was. I had contacted him to be a part of the Buddy Rich Memorial Scholarship Concert, and our friendship sort of took off from there.
Did you find that the two of you had a very similar sort of feel for the project, a very similar vision of what you wanted it to be?
We definitely shared a vision about this project. It was amazing how quickly the whole thing came together, how trouble-free it really was. I mean, mostly if you think about the amount of people that were working on it and the amount of musicians, the amount of putting the music together and the drummers, it could have been really troublesome, and it wasn't. From the beginning, when we first had the idea of doing it, I think it was pretty much meant to be.
I was reading an article, an interview you did a while ago about how your father gave that party for Gene Krupa when he was sick and dying, and that was very much part of his philosophy, very much like bringing flowers to the living and making the most and making sure people knew how you felt about them, when they were around. It can't happen here now. But is there a way that this record is very much sort of a spirited and vital a tribute in the way maybe others don't quite achieve and don't quite manage to be?
I think this is a fitting tribute because of the feeling and the spirit of the people involved. In the studio, it was so amazing because everybody that came in just was sort of uplifted. You could just tell that there was such a feeling in the room. You don't really experience that often, where everyone that would walk in, it's like they knew something special was going on. And I think it's important. Unfortunately, it wasn't in Buddy's lifetime that we got to do this, but I think that for the young people coming up now who may not have had the opportunity to hear Buddy's music or see him play live, they'll hear this record or they'll see one of their favorite drummers on there and they'll say, hey, I better check this out, which only, brings the recognition full circle.
Mm-hmm. What do you think your father would have thought of this record?
I think my father would have been extremely humbled by this, because anytime that he was honored or asked to participate in something that had something to do with him, he was very modest about things like this. And I think he sometimes couldn't understand why all the fuss. And I think he would be honored, and I think he would be very happy.
Where did you think that modesty stemmed from?
I think that's his modesty. I'm not sure where that came from, but I think most people would be surprised to know that about him. He came on sometimes very brash, and sometimes the opposite was true. He was very humble about his own abilities. And although he knew that he was talented and he knew that he was great, I think that if you asked him, do you think you're the world's greatest drummer, his answer would be, well, I try. I try. I've attained a certain amount of greatness, goodness. And I don't think he ever considered himself as, hey, I'm the greatest drummer in the world.
Yeah. As you said that you wouldn't think that maybe a lot of people who were fans of his would know that side of him. I mean, are there other ways that that maybe fans didn't quite know, a lot about him that they couldn't have known? I mean, what were there certain things about Buddy that fans just wouldn't have known otherwise?
I don't think his fans. I think his fans probably only knew one side of him. They saw the person that was on Johnny Carson, or they saw the person that was, interviewed in print, or they saw, somebody who came down after a set and stood up and did stand up for 20 minutes, and I don't think a lot of people, probably only the family and very close friends, got to see the soft side of him, because that was really his true personality. Was a very loving, very caring, giving person, and I think having been in the business since he was 2 years old, you'd have to develop that other side, because you don't want to let the public in on your personal life.
I guess that kind of relates to the fact that you had said that there weren't any drums in your house when you were growing up. That there was no evidence of what your father did for a living. Did that seem strange to you, or was that sort of made sense at the time?
I think the fact that we didn't have any drum equipment in our house, to me, seemed normal, because it was something that he did for a living. He went out on the road, he came home, and when he was home, he was home. He didn't want to have anything to do with the business when he was at home, because his time at home was very, very rare. I mean, he was on the road sometimes 300 days a year. And so when he was home, he didn't want to know anything about it. He didn't want to talk business. He didn't want people calling that had to do with business. He was home, and that was it. And he was involved with what was going on in my life, what was going on in my mother's life, and that was it.
And then when he was back on the road, it was full on again. But what those brief times when he was at home, what was the Rich household like?
The Rich household was very interesting. Volatile place to be sometimes, but it was pretty normal, I guess, because it was the only life that I knew. So when I was always in school, obviously, so he would come to my school functions, and he would be involved in the homework and doing the normal things that parents do when they're home with you. I had a normal social life, saw friends, and that was it.
Did the pace of your life, dramatically change when Dad was home?
It was almost like a special occasion, because he was gone so much. So basically, everything in your life stopped, and you sort of focused on that for the time, the length of time that he was going to be there. So all of your activities and everything may have been put on hold for a while, and you did things. And I loved that, because he was more like a friend to me. And I really loved hanging out with him, and he was like the coolest guy, so it was really fun to do that. I didn't mind it at all.
So you guys were really into the whole concept of quality time.
We were definitely into the concept of quality time.
Now you spent a significant amount of time on the road with him?
I spent a lot of time on the road when I was growing up, because really, if I wanted to see him or spend time with him, I had to go to where he was. So during the summers, I was always on the road. Any school vacation, and sometimes not school vacations, I would take off and travel. And it was great. And my parents believed that I would get a better education actually going out into the world and seeing it firsthand than sitting in a classroom and reading about it, which was great. And I think that children that travel develop a sense outside of themselves. You have a sense of the world as a much bigger place.
What are some of your fondest or favorite memories from those times being out on the road?
Oh my God, there are so many memories. I mean, it's a whole lifetime of memories. I mean, there are just traveling and being on the bus with 15 musicians and having your father there, and sometimes developing crushes on musicians that were in the band, and that was an interesting situation at times as I got older. Difficult for the guys in the band, probably more so than me. But it was just fun. I mean, I got to travel and sang. After I was 13, I started singing with the band on a regular basis. So I was not only traveling, I was working as well, and that was great.
What was it like, coming in contact with some of the legends, like Sinatra and Count Basie and guys like that?
I got to meet a lot of really great people growing up, and Sinatra was a wonderful person. I mean, he was sort of like Uncle Frank, you know. And the time when my dad had a heart attack and had a bypass operation in 1983, and we lived right around the corner from Frank in Palm Desert, California. And so Frank would come over to the house and bring pasta that he had made. Or he'd make sauce and he'd bring it over. And it was just so weird to go to your door and the doorbell rings, you open the door, and there's Frank Sinatra standing there with a pot of spaghetti. It was really weird. So it was really cool. It was great.
That's
Very, very strange.
sounds like strange.
And I used to just sort of stand there and go, yeah, and you kind of check him out. And everything, the thing about Frank that I remember the most is that everything about him looked new. Like not a scuff on the shoes, and the pants were perfect, and the shirt was perfect, and the hair, and it was really, I used to sort of just stand there and stare at him.
But then he would just sort of like come through the door and say, hey,
Put that bread in the oven, it's gonna get cold, heat it up right away, get it to Buddy. It was funny.
There's much about Buddy's reputation for being difficult. Did you feel that that was a deserved reputation?
I don't think he was difficult. I think that he didn't stand for musicians in his band being less than what he expected. He only expected them to, really be there for 2 hours out of the day. And for those 2 hours, he wanted it perfect. And I think that people may get the wrong impression about him. At times, yes, he was difficult because he demanded a certain amount of perfection. But he never demanded anything more than he gave. And so he was there. He said, I don't want to hear about your aches and pains. I don't want to hear about that you have a cold. I don't want to hear about it all. He said, because I have a cold and my back hurts and I'm here and I'm giving it all. So for 2 hours out of the night, you can come here and do the same thing.
And his back probably was always hurting.
He had back trouble from, I think sometime in the 70s, he really, started having back problems from when, actually it was earlier, it was in the 60s, he was in a car accident and totaled an XKE Jaguar on an ice slick coming out of Lake Tahoe on a mountain road. Totaled the car. He actually got out of the car and took photographs of this. It looked like an accordion. And how he got out of there, I have no idea. But since that, he had always had back trouble.
Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah.
What was Buddy's relationship like with Johnny Carson? Like, he did the show something like 70 times or something.
His relationship with Johnny was great. It was a mutual admiration society. Johnny was a frustrated drummer, obviously, and he just thought Buddy was just not only a great musician, but loved his humor. And I think that's the thing that you saw when you watched the two of them together, is that they really cared about each other. And to spend time with the two of them away from the show was really funny, because it was like constant, like a ping pong game, with the two of them going back and forth trying to one-up each other. And they really, really loved each other.
Yeah, I guess for me growing up, like the main TV appearance that I remember was when he was on The Muppet Show.
Oh, yeah.
And, I was playing drums in school at the time, and I thought that was just like the coolest thing I'd ever seen.
Oh, The Muppet Show was great.
That drum battle he did with Animal.
Mm-hmm. That was fun, because I actually got to go over when he did The Muppet Show. And it was a great experience for him. He really had a great time. And the thing that I remember about that is that he didn't look at the script until the day before they shot it. You're there for a week, you rehearse, and the script had been laying there and laying there and laying there. And I kept saying to him, don't you think you better look at the script? Because he hated to rehearse. And it's like, oh, I'll look at it tomorrow, I'll look at it tomorrow. And finally, the night before they shot it, I said, you're going to sit down and we're going to go over this script, because you're going to get there tomorrow and not know one line. And so we went all night, we did the script, and he went in the next day and shot it. And I wonder if he hadn't done that, what he would have done,
Yeah, I guess not rehearsing drumming is one thing, but
you got to rehearse, right?
Lines,
Acting, right?
Make those up out of national talent. It seemed to me, just by that interview I think you had done in Modern Drummer or something a while ago, that it seemed like Buddy definitely had developed kind of a personal code or philosophy, sort of for every situation. It seemed that maybe he had some sort of he had developed some sort of rule that applied to the situation. Did it seem that way to you, or where did that come from?
You know, his personal philosophy was really be true to yourself. You don't go off and change your views just because that happens to be the popular view. You know, he had very specific ideas about things, and even when it wasn't the most popular thing to believe in or the most popular thing to say, he never wavered in his beliefs or in his feelings about things. And I think that was pretty amazing to me. You know, that I could hear an interview that he had done 20 years ago, and then you could hear an interview from 10 years ago, and basically it's the same. You know, so it wasn't, you know, to go with the flow or to go with, you know, any way the wind blew. You know, and I think that to me was something that hopefully I picked up on a lot, because that was pretty amazing. That somebody like that, who was in a business where, you know, if you don't say the right thing and do the right thing all the time, you may not work again. And he worked for almost, you know, 70 years.
Yeah, I guess that you could definitely apply that. I mean, I was talking to Neil, and he was saying how, you know, Buddy loved, you know, the big band music, but at the same time didn't want to push himself as, you know, a nostalgia sort of, which it would have been, you know,